In my last video, I was discussing Edgar Allan Poe's very famous story, The Telltale Heart, and comparing it, the antagonist or the villain or the central character of the story to John Rowe, who, as I've explained, is a debauched nobleman in the fictional sort of dystopian sci-fi series that I've been working on. Debauched nobleman who lived in the 12th century, who started this horrible legacy of oppression within the aristocracy, which led to this sort of horrible dystopia in year 2400, decades and decades and decades later in the United States. And John Rowe had basically kidnapped this child prodigy musician, the composer, I should say, named Edmund, because ideologically he thought he was too threatening. He thought that he was too much of a free spirit, and he thought his family was a bad influence on him. So I was drawing parallels in my last video with John Rowe and the main sort of unnamed character in A Telltale Heart, partly because of the issue of mental illness and madness and evil. I mean, those are the obvious things, right? But I think another interesting point that it makes me think about, which is something that I want to add to my book series as well, is within this dystopia of the book series. I want there to be perhaps these sort of secret prisons or psychiatric institutions that are built within schools. That it starts this sort of cyclical, really sort of painful, horrible pattern that perpetuates and never stops, of some people being driven to insanity, and then society having an excuse to crack down on them even more, or alternatively trying to re-educate people who are not insane, but who maybe have a genuine perceptiveness, an ability to perceive patterns that are too threatening to see, basically, that these institutions don't want people to see. And A Telltale Heart, obviously, it made me wonder if this character was really a product of a larger sort of kind of broader problem, a kind of a sort of sickness that we tend to perpetuate, or at least in the society that Edgar Allan Poe was alive in, tended to perpetuate. And then a certain kind of system having an excuse to crack down on people like that. Or it could have been, I'm just speculating, it could have been that he was just simply a nutcase all on his own, but I get the sense that obviously it is something cultural. It's something that is obviously much bigger, and I think some of the differences, I would say, between the antagonist or the villain in the story and John Rowe is obviously that John Rowe is in some ways a little bit more complex. He's not as extreme, but he's more complex in the sense that he has there's many different layers. He has a facade of being very unimpressive sometimes and unremarkable. You don't know whether he's, as I've explained, highly intelligent or whether he's a moron. He's very much a mystery. But I get the sense that if he were just simply slick, right, that may not deceive people quite as well. Ironically, that I think it's his earthiness, that sense that it's like a form of populism, basically. That populism is pretending that I'm your guy, I'm just the other guy, I'm like the everyman, right? And that's a way to seduce people. Not in a sexual sense, but just in a social sense, right? So essentially, that populism, I can imagine, can leak into these creepy kind of institutions that exist in this sort of fictional world that I am creating.